Hi there, and welcome to the Smallholder Food Business Development Institute podcast. Today, we are so excited to have Larry Shiller on, and we are going to be talking about grit and resiliency and small business. And let me tell you, what better time than now to be talking about this topic. So, Larry, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, Michelle. Nice to be with you, and to all your listeners. Hope everyone's safe and well. I'm holed up with my family here in Wilton, Connecticut, and we're actually enjoying it, making the best of, the situation. We don't want to judge it. We're just going to enjoy it. Normally what I do, still doing it. I write curricula for homeschool children, Montessori-based. And Socratic-based curricula for kids to learn at home. Now, we've typically targeted homeschool kids, and now there's a lot of homeschool kids. So we're very busy because lots of people need curricula, especially math and language arts, the core curriculum subjects, for their 3 to 13-year-olds. So we have that. We actually have some free stuff. If your listeners are interested, I'll give you a link later. You're welcome to promote it to free fractions kit that's based on Montessori. The other thing that I do is I'm working on a startup where we provide a no-code data solution for startups, for other startups, to ingest, store, and report on their data without having to do any code. So most startups, they get a new customer, they add a new row to the customer table, and after a couple of months, they have 16 Excel spreadsheets. We solve all that problem so they can focus on their business, not on their data. I mention that because we are interested in bringing more efficiency to the market, and we kind of need that today more than ever. But happy to be with you and share information and discussion on this really important topic of grit and resiliency.
Right, and that's really what brought us together. I think over LinkedIn. And so, why don't we actually just start here? Why don't you define for us how grit or resiliency, are they the same thing? Are they different things? Like, talk to us about what they actually mean, because we hear a lot of it. Mm-hmm.
Well, I define grit, and there are a bunch of definitions of what grit and resiliency are. So I'll just give you my definition of how I'm using it in this conversation. We define grit as the ability to work through negative emotions to reach your goal. And it is a pretty compact definition. It wasn't easy to come up with. So, but once we had it, it really applies to so many situations in life, and basically, cognitive behavioral therapy says, look, you're feeling one way and you can choose to act according directly by your feelings, which is what a lot of animals do. Their amygdala go off and then they act according to that directly. Or as humans, we have the ability to press pause and let our frontal lobes take over and decide what's our goal in this situation. We're feeling this way, great, but what's our goal? And use that feeling to understand reality better and then choose the behavior that's best in that situation. And so if you're able to, that's really kind of a necessary component of grit. And if you're able to do that, you are much more able to exhibit grit behavior and grit values.
I think that's so true, and we talk about that a lot when tolerating negative emotion. I've got to tell you, cleaning, sanitizing, making sure you're meeting all your critical limits, not always the most interesting work, and does frankly rely on tolerating boredom. And we talk a lot about relying on your prefrontal cortex versus sort of the more habitual thoughts that we have. And I think that's super interesting that you teach this to kids. So tell me, what led you to this work?
Well, we actually came up with a piece of software, an app that measures and builds grit. And that's through the Shiller Learning, and which is part of a nonprofit called the Rising Stars Foundation. And it's a very useful tool for employers as well as college admissions departments to see, geez, the person that they're admitting to their school is the person that we're about to offer employment to, do they have grit? Because employees with grit, they're going to stay at their job longer. They're going to be more productive, and they're going to learn faster and be able to grow in their job. These are three great things that any employer would want in an employee. And at schools, 39% of students don't graduate from a four-year university, even if you give them 6 years to do it. It's a huge number. So the number one criteria, believe it or not, whether it's Harvard or a local community college, the number one thing that they want from their students is to graduate. And if you don't have grit, you're not going to graduate. So it's really important for a school to admit students with grit. And also students with grit, they're going to be more successful in life. It'll enhance the reputation of their alma mater, and they're more likely to contribute money back to it. So there's a lot of wins for a college to admit students with grit. Now, the way this all came about was we have this, as I mentioned, this curricula for 3 to 13-year-olds. And a lot of parents were saying, Larry, how come you don't have a curricula for like 14 and up? Like, we'd like to extend the method. It works great. So we were toying with this and playing with the idea. And I said, you know what? I'm going to develop an online component, because what we have for 3 to 13-year-olds is a multisensorial, hands-on, kinesthetic, auditory, tactile activities. You know, this kids get older. They don't need as much of that. So we designed an online program, and we went through a lot of work, a lot of expense, ran it through beta testing, and 80% of the teenagers who went through the app failed to finish a single topic. We said, what a huge failure this is. Like, you know, we're really going to piss off our customers here. You know, like 80% of them are going to, like, you know, not use the product. So through my data work, that's the other hat that I wear, I found myself consulting on data strategy at Yale University, and I'm at the School of Medicine talking to a bunch of deans and professors and other people, researchers. Everybody introduces themselves, and then they said, Larry, tell us about you. And I said, well, I start failed businesses. And they said, well, what do you mean by that? And I told them the story of this product. But I noticed they were listening with rapt attention. They hung on every word. And, like, you know, I told the story. It's like, it's not that interesting. So I asked them, I said, you know, what was it about this story you guys found so interesting? And almost in unison, they said, we want to know who the other 20% is. And that was just a facepalm moment. Like, oh my gosh, what I had unwittingly discovered was a way to find students with grit. The 20% of the students who actually completed the topic have grit. So I completely reformed the product and turned it into what I call Gritter Profile, gritterprofile.org. Anybody can go there for free. An employer, you know, we're allowing employers to use this. And so we're in a beta test form. You can use it for free now. So any employer can go in, sign up, and employees or prospective employees can now go in and they can measure, and they'll actually build their own grit. So we measure grit values and grit abilities. So for example, if they can pick their own topics. So they go in and they say, you know, I know this topic, let me go pick it. And they answer every question very quickly. They get everything correct. We give them immediate feedback, transfer feedback. We say, look, what's your value system? Do you want to just get everything right all the time and everything's going to be easy for you? Well, that's the value system you're showing. How about picking a topic that's hard? And so then they might go and say, okay, let me pick a topic that's hard. I'm going to miss a few questions. Look, we don't care if they get it right or wrong. We're observing their behavior. And so what do they do when they get something wrong? They don't know the answer. They're going to experience some negative emotions. They're going to feel frustration. You know, they might not feel as good about themselves, whatever it is. They might feel angry, or they might say, you know, why am I being asked to put in this position? Whatever it is. And people have different reactions to it. And we've asked people what their reactions are. We want to see how they behave, and we want to give them tools and immediate feedback so they can leverage that negative emotion into positive behavior. So they have lots of, you know, they can ask questions to tutor box. There's a hint button they can click. They can look at their past history of questions, which could help them. Anything. They can Google stuff. It's an open book thing. So what we find is that people sometimes feel like it's wrong to ask for help. So we observe that. We notice it and do it. So we feed back to them immediately. It's like, you know, it's okay to ask for help. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. And over time, they start to use the tools. And over time, their grit values go up and their grit abilities go up. So you can actually see it over time, how they've improved, which is consistent with the work of Carol Dweck, who's a professor of psychology at Stanford University, wrote a book called Mindset, amazing a book, where she talks about having a fixed mindset where, you know, look, so much you can accomplish, no matter how hard you work, you're not going to accomplish more. People give up easily with a fixed mindset. And then there's a growth mindset, which is, look, I'm going to fail. It's both, you know, doesn't matter, people fail all the time. How do you deal with that failure? And people with a growth mindset, you know, they have just the same negative emotions as anybody else, but they suck it up and they say, look, well, all right, let me understand why I failed. Let me get better at it. So the breakthrough in this book is what Carol Dweck says: you might have a fixed mindset, but we don't have a fixed mindset about you. You can develop a growth mindset. So that's pretty cool.
Right. No, that's pretty interesting. I mean, what we talk about here is developing the capability. And, you know, like we're developing the capability right now to have 3 kids at home that we are homeschooling again, because we homeschooled them a while back, and run a business out of our house. And I think a lot of what you're talking about is developing capabilities and giving yourself some grace to fail and to allow yourself to move forward. So how, like, what's your unique skill set that led you to this? Because this is a pretty, I mean, there are not a whole lot of people doing this sort of work really, and bringing it. I mean, there are people who are doing it in the ivory tower, of course, right? And there are some books. There's Carol Dweck's book. There's Angela Duckworth's book. But like, you're really bringing it to companies and to people and making it, you know, like available to everybody. So what's your skill set that you are bringing to this that makes you different?
Well, first, I don't think I have any unique skills. I'm way too average a person to think that might be true, but I have developed skills that together help me craft goals, brainstorm different paths, synthesize and choose the one to follow, and then execute on that chosen path. Now, alas, I don't do any of these 4 things particularly well, so I'm constantly working on 2 other skill sets, which is enhancing recognizing when I'm going down the wrong path, and then analyzing, why did I do that? So I don't repeat that mistake. So I don't do either of those 2 things particularly well either, but by and large, I get incrementally better at all 6 of those things over time. So that usually generates better outcomes over time. You know, I don't consider myself successful if that means I've reached a destination as opposed to having a good process with continuing better outcomes. It's like happiness. I hear people say things like, if only I could have a better boss, I'd be happy. If only the weather had cooperated, I'd have succeeded. If only blah, 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 I'd be whatever. Right. So to me, being successful means having a good process and avoiding bad practices like that. The good process is employing this, for me, is employing the 6 things I just talked about: setting a goal, thinking about different ways to reach it, choosing one and doing it, and then having a good smoke detector to tell me when things are going off the rails, and finally being able and willing to endure the drill down into the root cause. So there are some useful tactics I've discovered along the way. Obviously, I'm a frameworky kind of guy. I'm talking about some frameworks that work well for me. I realize that's not everybody, so which is great. So many different ways to do stuff. But I found that saying "if only" leads to bad outcomes. So I avoid saying that in all situations. And if somebody else says that, my smoke detector goes off and says, okay, what's going on with this person? They're exhibiting a fixed mindset thing. Let me work with that person, probe them, see if that's true, and maybe help each other. But I found, by and large, people who say "if only" are deflecting reality and avoiding discomfort. Another example, saying what I want to accomplish out loud is counterproductive if it keeps me from doing it. So studies have actually shown that people who do that get an endorphin release when they say it. Oh, I'm going to do this. And then they don't see the need to actually do it. So sure, write it down as part of your plan. Don't blab about it. save your talk for getting people to brainstorm, analyze different plans, and support and implement those plans, chosen plans. And look, if you've done all this and you're working on it, then yes, by all means, tell everyone what you're going to accomplish. One thing that does work is what Jeff Bezos does at Amazon. When they start a new project, they write a press release when they start the project, not when they finish it. Before they've done any work, the first thing they do is they write a press release. So this makes the goal with all the features and benefits and who's going to benefit from this project crystal clear. And it gives everybody a strong sense of direction.
I love that so much. And I think that watching your language around if only, and I think a lot of people right now are, well, if only coronavirus wasn't happening, if only my kids weren't home, if only, if only, if only. And it is a way of avoiding reality. I mean, the reality is it's here.
It's exactly right. You know, the whole reality discussion is fantastic. And of course, I have a framework for that. So what we're talking about here is there's, you know, you've heard about 4 stages of grief, and there's, you know, I don't know, 12 steps if you're an alcoholic, and there's different things for different. So I have 4 steps of reality. And the first step is denial. It's like, well, I don't really need to know that, you know, several thousand people died in China from the coronavirus at the beginning, you know, in February, early March. Or I really don't have, I don't, you know, it'd be great if I did something about it, but I really can't concern myself with the fact that there are sects in Africa that are killing and raping women. Now, that, you know, it's bad, and I'm in denial on it because I'm not doing anything about it. And it's certainly, I don't have strong negative emotions about it, right? I'm just sort of like, I'm going to ignore that reality because I got to get on with my life. I have to pick and choose the things I'm going to care about. Those are terrible things. And a lot of people do care about it. And, you know, we're lucky in the world to have those people. I'm just not one of those people that's going to like spend 3 hours of my day to tackle some of these severe issues that we have. So you could say I'm in denial on it. So I'm being very frank about what this means. The second stage is reality, is a rejection of reality, which is now marked by emotion. Now we can say, you know, I'm really upset about this. I'm angry, and I want to do something about it. I'm pissed off though, and that's marked by frustration and anger and negative emotions. And so if you want to think of reality sitting in a corner, we're denial. We put a wall so we don't see it. Now we've got a lens with a bunch of minus signs in it. We have a negative lens on reality. We only see what's bad about that reality. And so that's the second stage. The third stage is acceptance, where we remove the lens, and now we're just looking at reality without judgment. There's no negative judgment on reality. We want to understand it better. And so the third stage is marked by questions. Like, okay, well, what caused that sect to have that behavior in Africa? And so we can start getting understanding of the situation without judgment. You know, it doesn't mean we're condoning it. We're asking questions to understand what reality is. And we find that a lot of people, if you just ask a question about something, other people will come and say, "Wait, are you condoning that behavior?" No, I'm trying to understand it, right? So, and we need to go there before anything can happen. So if we were all computers, things would end with this acceptance phase. We ask questions of reality and we understand it. But the beautiful thing, being human, so we have this ability to have lateral thinking. And if you look up lateral thinking in the dictionary, it actually means illogical thinking. But it's sort of the quantum physics of the mind, where, you know, in the quantum vacuum, things are popping in and out of reality all the time, and particles emerge and they annihilate each other. So we have these quantum thoughts that kind of come out of nowhere. They're lateral thoughts, and if you're me, most of them suck. But occasionally there's a good one. And so if we can build a linear bridge to that seemingly illogical lateral thought, we really got something great, and we get enthusiastic about it. And that's, you know, JFK's speech, we're going to land a man on the moon and return safely back to Earth. That is the type of thinking that only humans really can have. And that's how we achieve everything great that's achieved in this world as a result of that. So we move from acceptance, and we get this lateral thought, and we move into embracing. And now we've got an idea. It's like, you mean if we were to have I'm making stuff up because I don't know the situation of Boko Haram and these other sects that are causing so much pain, in Africa and other parts of the world. But, maybe if we were to say, is something in the diet? I'll give you an example of that. A lot of people think this is true. I happen to think this is true because there's some science behind it. We had huge murder rates in the 60s and 70s. New York City, thousands of people a year were being murdered. Now the murder rate's down to, 300 or 400 a year. So there were a lot of police programs that went into place. So people said, well, there must be all these great police programs that worked. But it turned out that was coincidental, but it wasn't correlated, not causative. What people actually think what happened was that lead poisoning was the root cause. Kids were, lead was in the environment, it was in the gasoline, it was in paint, it was in pipes. That's why PB is the symbol. It means plumbing. It's from ancient Rome. And so it turns out people get violent when they have a lot of lead in their systems and they have brain damage. And so a lot of people think today that the reason for the high murder rate in the 60s and 70s is actually environmental due to all the lead, which is a whole other story about a scientist who in 1915 or thereabouts was lobbying Congress on behalf of the lead industry, who was paid by the lead industry and knew full well that lead was damaging. And so that's a great history. It's a great case study about how people can value things over truth in life. And it results in bad outcomes by and large when that happens. So that one story just has lots of them. But that's an example of the change framework and how we can move ourselves from denial to rejection to acceptance to embracing, and which really results in great outcomes. But it's hard to do. When I'm in rejection and I'm angry about something, I've really got to think CBT and say, okay, well, how do I want to behave in this situation? Because I'm sure feeling angry and not, my amygdala is firing on all four cylinders. So what do? That's the hard thing. And that's an element of grit. That ability means you can be more resilient if you can separate those two things out.
I love that so much. So to add on to that lead story, so I'm a Wellesley College alum, and we had our Alumni Achievement Awards. We have them in the fall, and one of the women who won an achievement award this year was a MD out at Nebraska, and she was almost the leading voice in understanding how lead contaminated in the environment.
Really? Oh, is that great? Huh.
She tells this fabulous story. So there was a battery smelting plant in her hometown, and she was a pediatrician, and she kept getting these kids with these like super high lead level, really high lead levels, and community, like the community public health effects of significantly high lead levels. And she tells this story where she and a fellow MD kept going to to planning and zoning and the people, like the people in the town, and saying, we have to stop this. This is like literally killing our children. And they're like, yeah, but jobs. And so what they noticed was that the pigeons were dying. And so she tells the story of, there was like one Saturday where nobody was at work, and they climbed the fence at the battery smelting plant, went over, got the dead pigeons, threw them. So like she threw them to her colleague over the fence, went and necropsied them, and found these like catastrophically high levels of lead in these pigeons. And it started her work that eventually ended up in getting the Clean Air Act passed.
Really? How about that?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And it's because she had grit. She wouldn't take no.
Right.
She wouldn't take no for an answer.
That's a great example of grit and resiliency, because boy, it's not just people saying, gee, making fun of you. It could be life-threatening.
Right, exactly. I think that is super, super interesting. And really, when it comes down to it, literally world changing, when we're able to create that sort of lateral thinking and quantum leaps. But we only get there. I love your scale so much, but we only get there after we accept reality. Yeah.
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
So that's pretty amazing. Okay. So now we've talked about hiring people and making sure they have grit, but what about our entrepreneurs themselves? what advice would you give someone who either wants to be an entrepreneur or who is on their entrepreneurship journey?
Well, you know, when you look at that journey, it's, I think I have the question why. In other words, why does an entrepreneur want to develop resiliency and grit? And talking about reality, what's the reality of the entrepreneur? When an entrepreneur, or anyone for that matter, tells me that they want to develop grit, they want resiliency, my first question is why? What's the reason? Because there are pros and cons to having grit. The pros are obvious. You know, you'll be more productive, you're willing to take on uncomfortable challenges, and you're okay with failure. Those are actually the pros. But there are cons to being resilient or having grit. First, people will make fun of you, or they'll think badly of you when you fail. You know, it's not pleasant for anybody to have the world, you know, be unhappy with you or look, you know, make fun of you, or, you know, we're social beings. Second, it's hard work and it's painful. It's easier, at least in the short term, to sleep in, browse social media, watch TV, or give up when things are hard. So if you value what other people think of you more than your goals, you will not be resilient. There's no judgment attached to that. That's just an if-then statement. If you value comfort over digging deep to find the root cause of your problems, you will not be resilient. You won't have grit. Most entrepreneurs will not be resilient if they live to please other people or avoid discomfort. Now, when I say to please other people, I'm excluding, you know, I'm assuming they want to please their customer, but even that has its limits. You know, Steve Jobs didn't do things because his customers wanted. He did things for a higher purpose. And there were a lot of things he did that people thought were nuts that customers would hate. When the first Macintosh came out, he had a fixed amount of memory of 128K, which is laughable. But that's what he had in the machines. That's what people are going to need. Steve Jobs knew that. He put it in. Macintosh, unbelievably popular, successful computer. So even then, he wasn't listening always to his customer. So this thing is very interesting. You know, the thing is, there's good news. You know, you mentioned Carol Dweck. You may not be resilient now, but you can become resilient. You can get grit if you don't have it. Her book is called Mindset, and it demonstrates this potential.
I love that so much. And I think that is a great place for us to end, because you have given us, so I'm going to like go back and listen to this like 5 more times, because there is so much good stuff here. Okay. So let's say it one more time. I know you said it during the podcast, but where can people find your work or get in touch with you if they'd like more information?
So if you're an employer or an employee looking for a job, or an employer looking to hire people, go to gritterprofile.org, Gritter, G-R-I-T-T-E-R, profile.org. It's run by Rising Stars Foundation, a nonprofit. And go ahead and get your, spend a little bit of time, 5-10 minutes, you'll start knowing about your grit, values, and abilities. That's a great place to start. If you have kids, if you're watching this and you have kids at home, and you're like, okay, I want to be sure I have really great curricula for them. If they're normally in school, you want to be sure they're prepared, find holes, diagnose their holes and fill them. Go to shillerlearning.com, SHILLER learning.com. And it'll step you through, which is a lot of free stuff there. If you would like to get a copy of the free fractions kit, it's a digital download, just email sales@shillerlearning.com, make a request, say that you heard about it from Larry Shiller, and they'll send you a link so that you can get access to that for free. We want to support all the parents who are doing double duty here, trying to manage their incoming telephone calls and whatnot, which Skype is amazing, isn't it, the way that works out? Rings out all the devices. So these are just resources for you, and we hope this helps you through this tough time for everybody, and so you can make the best of it.
Thank you, thank you, thank you so much, Larry, for coming on the show. And we will put up links in the show notes for gritter.org and Schiller Learning. And I look forward to diving into those. And I will go get fractions help for my kids because we need it. We need it. All right. Thank you so much. You have a fantastic day.
Great. Same to you, Michelle. Thanks for having me on.